I didn't raise my voice when she told me she was done. No arguing, no begging, no pushing for explanations. I just nodded. She clearly wasn't ready for that. You could tell she walked into this moment expecting chaos, maybe even a dramatic argument she could spin around and claim she handled maturely. But I just stood there and said, "Okay, if that's what you want." Her name was Rachel. For almost 3 years, she was a rhythm of my days. We met in a coffee shop when I was 28. We were both exhausted, both surviving off caffeine and half dreams. What started as playful sarcasm over music and coffee slowly evolved into dinner dates, movie nights, and a kind of comfort that makes you think you finally found your resting place. She was my person until suddenly she wasn't. It began subtle. Cancel plans. Shorter replies. A weird stiffness in her hugs. That slow, quiet distance that arrives before anyone ever admits the truth. One night, I noticed her smiling way too long at her phone. I asked who it was. She said, just someone from work. I didn't argue, but something inside of me quietly shifted. People say you can sense when someone already mentally left. I could. So, when she eventually said she needed space, I had already accepted it inside me. I didn't pack her things, didn't ask for anything back. I didn't block her. I didn't stalk her online. I just slowly faded out of her life, the same way she had been fading out of mine. The first few months after were weird. I kept expecting her name to light up my lock screen again. Sometimes I'd snap awake at 2 a.m., half convinced she was still next to me. But reality got quieter, and silence eventually became normal. I worked longer hours. I hit the gym more. I finally started reading again, something I had stopped once we moved in together. A full year drifted by like that. Then one random afternoon, a mutual friend texted me, just letting you know, Rachel's engaged. I stared at the message, not angry, not surprised, just still. Turns out, she was marrying that same guy from work. Later that night, I poured a drink and sat on the balcony while the city breathed underneath me. I pictured her wedding, her smile, her dress, his face. I thought I'd feel rage, or jealousy, but instead, I felt relieved. Relieved that I never fought for somebody already walking away. Relieved I never destroyed myself trying to keep her. But life is wild. It doesn't just end on closure. It circles back. About a year after her engagement, she messaged me on Facebook. "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't respond instantly. Almost 2 years had passed since we spoke. But seeing her name again shook loose old memories. I checked her profile. She looked the same, just tired around her eyes. No photos with her husband. No ring anywhere. 2 days later, I replied, "Sure, what's up?" She said she wanted to meet for coffee, just to catch up. Part of me was curious. Part of me screamed not to reopen wounds that finally healed. Curiosity won. A week later, we sat in that exact same coffee shop where it all began. Same corner table. She smiled when she saw me. That same half smile that once melted every defense I had. "Hey," she whispered, "you look different." "Time changes people," I said. We did the awkward small talk, work, mutual friends. The filler speech people use when real honesty feels too heavy to touch. Then she finally exhaled and said quietly, "I wanted to say sorry. I shouldn't have left the way I did." I stayed silent. She kept talking. She said she thought what she had with him was real, and it wasn't. Their relationship fell apart in less than a year. He cheated on her with someone at their job. She stared down at her coffee. "I guess karma got me," she whispered. For a split second, I felt bad for her. Almost. I took a slow sip, mostly just buying time. The words between us felt heavy. Familiar. Cheating. Regret. Betrayal. Except this time she was the one saying them. "I'm sorry, Lucas," she repeated softer. I nodded. But forgiveness didn't instantly rise up like it used to. That older version of me. The guy who would cave every time she got emotional. He doesn't exist anymore. She kept explaining. She said she was confused back then, chasing some fake version of happiness. Everything she said sounded like the same things I once told myself trying to justify her leaving. "I know I hurt you," she whispered. "I just hope you're okay now." That line made me smile, not in happiness, but disbelief, because for the first time ever, I realized I actually was okay. I looked at her, really looked. The woman across from me wasn't the Rachel I once loved. Or maybe I had just changed too much to keep believing in that old illusion. I was hurt, I finally said, but I'm not anymore. She blinked. She expected more. She expected some doorway back into my life. I didn't offer one. We talked a little more. She mentioned moving back home, that she'd been thinking about us a lot lately, that I treated her better than she deserved. As I stood up to leave, she touched my hand lightly. Maybe we could try again sometime, she said, voice shaking. I paused, looked down at her fingers, touching mine. The old me would have grabbed her hand instantly, but silence answered for me. I think we already ended at the place we were supposed to end, I said, her eyes filled with tears. You're really not even willing to try? I did try, I told her, back when it still mattered. I walked out of that cafe, leaving her sitting in the same exact spot, surrounded by the ghost of whatever we used to call love. Outside in the cool air, I felt a peace I didn't even know I was missing. Not the peace that comes from getting someone back, but the kind that comes from realizing you no longer need them. Later that night, she texted again. I wish I understood you better. You were always too calm, too patient. I thought you didn't care. I left it unanswered. Some messages aren't meant to be replied to. They're just echoes of something already dead. Over the next few months, I'd see her name online every once in a while. Posts about healing, forgiveness, starting over. I hoped she meant that for herself. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't rewind. Time kept moving. I kept moving. One evening while cleaning the kitchen, I found an old picture of us in a drawer, both of us laughing, younger, believing love was simple. I stared at it for a moment, then slid it back inside, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Closure isn't a dramatic conversation or some grand final moment. Real closure is quiet. It's when you stop trying to prove you were right. It's when you stop replaying the what-ifs. One day you just wake up, and you don't feel anything toward it anymore. That's where I finally arrived. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. She just became someone who once mattered. And maybe that's how stories like ours actually end, not in explosions, not in revenge, not in cinematic endings. Just two people who crossed paths, changed each other, and eventually drifted away. Sometimes love doesn't end because of fight. Sometimes it just quietly runs out.